Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, cause we all gon' say, elevate, 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 higher, elevate, 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 higher. We gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. So great to have you all on one more time. It's your boy Josh.
And Reg.
And we're grateful to be back on with you yet again. Another week and more drama going down in the country. We are super happy to have you again. We had some stuff to chat through. Obviously, we have Mark Holland kind of getting unhinged in the question period and saying, well, you wanting to go on a family vacation is burning the whole planet up. We ask ourselves, do these people really believe this BS? Or is there something else going on behind the scenes with these jabronis? Because these people absolutely suck. And other things we'll be talking about today as well is the Conservatives calling a emergency meeting to get into the big old slush fund that Trudeau has been having $8 billion worth, and all the chaos and ridiculousness that's been coming out of that, and so much more. Reg, how you feeling, big dog?
I'm doing great. I just got back from a wedding. Friends of ours got married on the weekend, and I have to give a good shout out to a really good friend of mine. She had just got back from a trip from Scotland. Her flight was delayed a million times all over the place. Pearson is garbage if anybody's flown through there.
Yep.
And made it back to Halifax in the morning, and then that night babysat for us so that we could go out to our wedding. So I just
shout out babysitters.
Gotta give her the biggest shout out because she made the weekend awesome. So good friends, good people, keep them close by because they are definitely worth the investment because they will definitely be there for you when you need them most. So got to see that in action, and also got to go to a really amazing wedding, and may have got a little bit more lit than I was experiencing. than I was going to. I was like, oh yeah, I can drive home. And Jen is like,
no,
that ain't happening.
You're going to take it easy there, bud.
Yeah.
You sit in the back seat. Yeah, it was interesting. So this time of year for me is like heavy lacrosse. I'm playing, I'm coaching, in some cases, multiple teams. It's a busy time of year for your boy. But from time to time, your boy's able to squeeze in some softball.
Oh.
That's a new one for me this summer.
Okay.
Not on an official team, just kind of like when there's like a buddy of mine who plays, his team needs players from time to time. And he's like, if he manages to catch me on a night that I'm not doing lacrosse, I'll go out and play. But it was funny. It was one night, and I was just out warming up with my buddy. Just kind of get that. I haven't thrown a softball in a long time. So I was getting that arm warmed up and kind of getting ready to get this party started. And then as me and my buddy are throwing the ball, somebody comes up and he like whispers something to my friend. And my buddy shouts over to me. He's like, hey, this guy knows you. I was like, okay. Well, he likes your work. I'm like, what work are we talking about here? He's like, he listens to your podcast. And I was like, gee, that's wild. It was a pleasure to meet you. His name was Matt, and chatted it up a little bit, and I want to give a shout out to him because it was kind of funny to be like, meet someone out in the wild that you're about to play a sport with, and then talk about politics while you're on the bench in the middle of the games. It's great. It's a good time. So I thought that was kind of fun.
That is awesome. I love to see that. And it's funny how many people have just randomly been like, your face came up in my TikTok feed. I'm like, oh yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah. And I hate it so much. Yeah, it's as much as we get a lot of pushback online, sometimes it's nice when the pleasant faces show up and say, you guys are great. We love you guys, and we love you. We appreciate it. So we got some rapid fire. Before we get into the main core stories, there's some big things that happened this week that don't really deserve a segment in themselves, but deserve to be talked about.
Yeah, so exactly. We just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of an in the news kind of segment. So rapid fire. So $6.2 billion in investment has been removed from Canada in the first quarter. So that was something that just blew up. And so that's the first time in 14 years that investment has moved out of Canada, and especially at that magnitude. So this was actually something that was released by StatsCan, that was picked up by the Wall Street Journal, picked up by the Financial Times. It's a big deal. It's not the kind of indicator that we're looking for. And so that was not ideal.
Nope.
So next thing, Catherine Tate.
Shout out Catherine.
She CEO of CBC, if you all remember, she did quite a few interviews in front of the House of Commons, and they were questioning her on her bonuses and the bonuses that were going to be paid out to CBC. And she claimed to have no idea what those are going to be. Well, we just found out that $14.9 million is going out in bonuses to the employees of the CBC.
Or at least the top execs.
Yep. And her bonus in particular is estimated to be between $120,000 to $145,000.
Oh, yeah.
So on top of her salary. So she stands to do quite well. And I'm looking at this going, that's a whole person's salary, a really good salary for somebody just in her bonus. But, they couldn't keep people.
Yeah.
Unfortunate for them.
Had to let them all go.
Yeah.
And so, that whole story really is interesting. I remember we covered it when it first came out. And, and it's as much as you read the headline, it really fires you up, gets you really frustrated. People sign contracts, and a lot of times, like, their contracts are tied to specific performances and or getting certain milestones. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. Unfortunately, these people sign contracts and they likely hit these milestones. Not just like CBC said, well, we had such a great year, we're just going to give it all to our executives. That's just, unfortunately, not saying I agree with it, not saying I'm a huge fan of it, but that's kind of how this works. Is these executives will sign these contracts being like, hey, if I do X, Y, and Z, I'll get this amount at the end of the year. And even though the business itself absolutely sucked and underperformed, somehow these guys hit their milestones. I'm curious what they were and what they looked like, but they got paid out for it.
Yeah, and I exactly. I think we hit that one ad nauseum, honestly. Mm-hmm. But it's just, the question there is like, what were the KPIs then? If you had to lay off this many people and your readership is going down, that like CBC radio is like floundering, like what were the KPIs that you supposedly hit to earn the bonuses? But we're in rapid fire mode, so another time.
Great.
So there's also going to be a vote on changing the election date.
Woo!
So if you all remember, basically,
and not for what you want, not the one you want.
Basically, the election date that was fixed, it was claimed that it was going to be interfering with Diwali. So they wanted to move it to allow people to observe their religious traditions. And they couldn't possibly move it earlier because then that might interfere with municipal elections and it might interfere with Thanksgiving. Wow. So they were saying that this is really for you.
Thoughtful.
Right?
Very thoughtful.
So kind of them. So apparently the Conservatives, as we know, don't support the changing of the election date. The Bloc came out and said they don't support it either.
Oh, that's a big one.
That was a win. And then this is the icing on the cake.
Let's go.
Get ready.
Snake himself.
Good old Jagmeet. He's like, yeah, I don't think we support moving the date. I think we support like some of the protections in the bill that's going to help us like make it easier for Canadians and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, sir, you wrote this bill with the Liberals. And he's like, these Liberals, they're just trying to change the date for their own pensions. And it's like, okay, cool. He ripped off the Conservatives with that one.
Yeah,
but
even though it's all originated with you jabroni.
Yeah, exactly. So that's your rapid fire news for this week. But fun.
Yeah. So, the good news there is like, okay, the election date won't change. Hopefully. It's trending in a good direction. And maybe, just maybe, someone will get the wherewithal and have the gonads to say, you know what, we're calling an election now. We know it won't happen, but one can dream and one can hope.
Well, it's like, does he have to have this is the question I have, and maybe a viewer knows, does Jagmeet Singh personally have to have the election date moved in order to be eligible for his pension? Because if he does, then it doesn't matter. If they don't move the election date, then he could call an election right now and it wouldn't matter. So I don't know. It could be interesting.
I'm here for it. We want to see what's going on here. But moving into segment 1, Health Minister saying Canadians don't want a road trip. Mark Holland getting up in QP saying, we're really attributing to about 1.7% of the world's global emissions. So you and your family here in Canada, you want to go for a road trip? Wow, you are going to kill the earth. And quite frankly, I'm going to talk about it in such a sarcastic manner in question period that we're going to just make family vacations sound terrible altogether.
I know.
That's what Mark Holland did. in QP, and that was hilarious to witness and watch.
Good news, kids. You can take a summer fun time vacation where you're locked in a car for 10 consecutive days, nonstop with no bathroom breaks, and the Conservatives have a plan for you to have that summertime fun. And the cost? Give up the future of the planet, right? Don't worry, kids, about climate change. Don't worry about taking action on the planet. Enjoy your 10 hours in the car and let the planet burn.
So what I hate most about that is just the fact that it's like, you're the health minister, sit your stupid butt down because you do not know what you're talking about. That was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And that what I absolutely love is how he got roasted online.
Mm-hmm.
So Twitter started out by saying that Holland is renowned for having one of the larger and most costly staff budgets. So he would have flown to Toronto or from Toronto to Charlottetown to put in the hard work at the Liberals' fall cabinet meeting. Holland's commercial air travel from Toronto to Charlottetown with 6 total people would result in 4.7 tons of carbon for the round flight trip, or 400 kilometers in total. They equated this to over 19,000 kilometers of driving.
Gee.
Or 1,700 liters of fuel. So who's making the planet burn, sir?
Mm-hmm.
And they said that your family could drive from Toronto to Vancouver and back and do it again and still not touch the amount of emissions that his trip has cost. And so this is another part of that whole, like, you will own nothing and be happy. It's not a we. It's like, you won't take your family on road trips. I will still take my jet and my flights and whatever I need to do because I'm important. But you peons of Canada, nah, sorry, no fun for you.
Absolutely.
Pee in the car, apparently, because that's a thing.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. You're going to be in a car for 10 days straight with no bathroom breaks. Yeah. I don't know what world he lives in.
Yeah.
I've never been on a road trip like that in my life.
You know what? Maybe he's like bringing up a repressed memory and like that's what's happening there. And we really all should feel bad for him.
Yeah,
And
it's not a tough time.
It makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
Shout out to him. And we feel for you, Mark. Like, get some help because you need it.
Yeah. And this goes back to, 2020. In some ways, there's just like this. I go back to 2020 when I hear this, is who's essential and who's not, who can do X and who can't. And that's what this is reminding me of is as you said, I'm important. I'm an MP. I got business to take care of. I got to take all these trips. And you, who middle-class Canada, who doesn't exist anymore, but if you manage to scrape enough money together to be able to take a vacation, and that vacation involves driving, I pee on you. This is elitist to the nth degree. A, shows how out of touch he is first. Second, it displays to me just like the absolute hatred he has for family vacations and people going out and making memories. Like, I get you likely haven't, you've made a lot of money over your time as an MP. You haven't had to do a family vacation where you go to a campsite. You go drive 3 hours away. You go on flights. You get to enjoy your life. You get to do the amazing extracurricular things that us, middle-class people don't get to do. And that's how I feel about that. That's my emotional reaction to that, is these people hate me. And they want to remind me of it too. So,
yeah, and it's interesting because then you have Pierre talking about the summer carbon tax break that he had put forward. And he was saying that we're asking for a tax holiday on fuel that would save 35 cents a liter and allow families to get in their car, go on the road, do some camping, or just get away for a weekend. And that's the heart of it, right? It's like people, they're stressed out. They're hearing about possible wars in many parts of the world. You've got civil unrest across the country. Like, everything's expensive. Everything's stupid expensive. You can't even imagine taking a trip to Disney. So the best you can do is like hop in your car, like you said, go out to Blomidon, pitch a tent. But even that's just too much joy to allow for the Canadian public.
now you're gonna sit your sorry butt in your friggin' office chair and you're gonna work and make sure that the Canadian government gets your tax money. That's what you're gonna do.
well, productivity is down, so we can't have these people out there, vacationing.
No, vacation doesn't exist. We don't believe in that here. No, and oh man. Sorry, continue, Reg. I'm feeling fired up tonight.
You know what? I just think it's all hilarious. I think it's laughable because it's just the hypocrisy and the elitism. And I wonder when I see these kind of things, like, who is voting for the Liberals anymore? Like, they obviously are not courting the middle class, the Gen X, and the millennials, because that's who's going to be taking these family vacations. That's the people with young kids and people in that age bracket. So obviously they don't care about that group.
Well, I don't know if I shared this on this show, and if I have, I apologize in advance. But I remember talking to my father-in-law while I was last in the States, and he was kind of curious what politics were looking like up here. And I know he knew that we're coming up on an election here fairly soon. Obviously, they're hitting their election here in November. And he's like, "What's the temperature up there? Like, what's the vibe?" And I'm like, "Well, it's obviously it's tense like it is down here, but it's a slightly different at the same time." You have Trump, who's like really, we'll get into that a little bit later possibly, but we got Trump, who's like getting a lot of popularity from people who said they would never vote for him. We're like, maybe I will vote for him. And he's growing in his popularity, but there's still that group of Biden voters who's like, no, keep Trump out at all costs. We're going to keep voting Biden. Here in Canada, everyone, regardless of political stripes, wants Trudeau gone. Mm-hmm. No one likes him. People on the left say he's not left enough, and people on the right thinks he's nuts.
Wacko Josh.
Sorry,
they think he's wacko.
He's a wacko. My apologies. And that's kind of where things stand here in this country, which I think is unique to some degree. And we'll see what ends up happening. But stuff like this happening in question period, which does not really happen in the States. You see things erupt in like committee, for example, where they talk about each other's eyelashes. But here in question period in Canada, we get this every week, every day of like MPs going at it, and they have a lot of time to say a lot of stupid things. And this is one of those scenarios.
I love that you threw in the AOC eyelashes.
That was so funny, dude.
If anybody hasn't seen that, go watch that. It's hilarious.
Yeah. Girl, baby, girl, don't you go. Yeah. Iconic moment. Moving on here. Still in this whole trend of the question period, we had Pierre Poilievre and Trudeau go at it, combat question period over housing. And Poilievre was grilling Trudeau a little bit, and the response that Trudeau gave and then the response that Poilievre gave I thought was really interesting. And there wasn't a whole lot of tangible, interesting conversation happening here, but it was funny. And we're going to show you what happened here.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition's criticism is there's too many measures in our housing plan. Housing should be solved by a simple one-size-fits-all solution, according to the Leader of the Opposition. That's perhaps how he managed to build only 6 affordable homes when he was Minister of Housing. Because yes, we have a broad range of initiatives that are delivering on housing, like topping up the Housing Accelerator Fund with $400 million, a new $6 billion Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund to help communities build. We're leveraging transit funding to build more homes. We're launching a housing design catalog. We're incentivizing more skilled trade workers.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He's announcing a catalog, everybody. Hey, right on. Give him a round of applause. Come on, give him a round of applause. You can't afford a home. You might end up in a tent. Your rent is doubled. But hey, you've got a brand new catalog. Mr. Speaker, the question was, will he build 550,000 new homes, yes or no?
So obviously a kind of a funny moment. And the question is very serious because this their goal is to try and build 550,000 homes per year till 2031. Mm-hmm. That's a big undertaking. So the question was asked directly, are you going to be able to hit this? And then obviously that's the answer Trudeau gave. And then the sarcasm followed by Poilivere, which I thought was in some ways some levity I needed in all this crazy political mess.
Well, that's the thing is like, I'm hearing a lot of criticism where people are like, Poilivere is just making this into a joke, blah, blah, blah. And you know what? Part of it's like, he can't do anything. He's completely handcuffed by this liberal NDP agreement, supply and
demand.
Yeah, no, supply and confidence.
Supply and confidence.
Yeah,
They're supplying and they're demanding. Yeah.
yeah, they don't understand supply and demand is the thing.
Yeah.
But like, even 550, like they're bringing in 250,000 people to 500,000 people every year. So their range is 250 to 500,000 people. Like, is that amount of housing going to cover that and make things affordable again for the people who already live here? I don't know. I'm just wondering how they're going to, I'm genuinely curious how they're going to make this happen, apparently.
They're not. That's what's going to happen because they haven't delivered on anything since 2016. They gave us weed. That's what they gave us. And that's the only thing they've really accomplished in the past 9 years. But any promise they've made around housing or any type of infrastructure, healthcare, what have you, they've done nothing except for burn a bunch of money to their favorite homies in these businesses and consultants and dried up this Canadian economy. And that's what they've done.
Well, man, I think like you might need some ganja to like calm those bad vibes down. And luckily, Mr. Trudeau's made it legal.
True. Not wrong.
But it's like last week when we talked about housing, like 25% of housing starts for single family homes down 25%. How are you building more? You can't even keep up with the same level that you were building before. So yeah, I totally agree. Like womp womp, they're not going to build it. And they just keep adding more and more people because they need to make that GDP look good. So yeah.
And then on top of that, you just have the issues of the cultural tensions that are happening on the ground too, which is an uncomfortable conversation that people don't want to have, but now you have to have it because it's right in your face.
Yeah.
You have shootings happening on the ground and that are likely targeted because of someone's religious beliefs, political beliefs, and it's only getting worse. What are you seeing happening?
Well, I know that you're referring to the Jewish school that was shot.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what I said last week is that when you're looking at folks who are coming in from like horrific scenes and you're trying to add them into a somewhat multicultural, peaceful society where everyone's supposed to coexist and their family has been bombed, they've lost their home and they blame a specific group. How could you not see that erupting in tension in the new country that they've moved to when they see folks who have the same religion as the folks that just blew up their house? Like, whether you believe that's right or wrong, that's not the point. The point is like, how do you maintain cultural harmony in a country that is multicultural when you've got a group of people that you're bringing in who are very, very angry, very triggered, and probably traumatized? And you're expecting those folks to come in and, you know, just assimilate, learn a new language, learn a new culture, learn a new environment, start a job, create chocolate, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like, are you serious? Like, how many times has that happened? Once.
Well, what I thought was interesting with all of this and the things that are kind of transpiring is Premier Doug Ford is at his wit's end.
Oh, I know.
He's done. My favorite part about this press conference, he talks about the kind of things that are happening and erupting around the city. And he's flanked by Mayor Olivia Chow, who's far left, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who we know is far left. And the words that come out of Ford's mouth and seeing their reactions is absolutely gold. Check this out.
Enough is enough. You're bringing your problems from everywhere else in the world. You're bringing it to Ontario, and you're going after other Canadians, as the Prime Minister said. Unacceptable. I got an idea. Before you plan on moving to Canada, don't come to Canada if you're going to start terrorizing neighborhoods like this. Simple as that. You want to come to Canada. You want to be a resident of Ontario. You get along with everyone.
So here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with what he said. Obviously, it lacked a little bit of tact. But Olivia just like looking down on the ground. Oh boy, here we go. This is my voting base. You can't be talking about them like that.
And then she looks over at Trudeau too, and she's like, "Oh, you're gonna stop this guy?
Please put a hand on his shoulder, do something."
Trudeau's just like,
"Yeah, yep, keep talking."
Yeah. Canada.
Yeah. We love it. We love Canada. It was interesting because obviously what people got fired up about is the fact they don't really know the identities of those who did the shooting yet. So Ford got out there and just said, we're making an assumption here that there's only really one group of people who've really been hating Jews lately and made themselves known. So we're going to assume it was them. And but people obviously didn't like that assumption. And Ford doubled down on it. They asked him later, like, so did you want to massage that a little bit? Did you want to take any of that back? He's like, no, I was right. Like, this needs to end now. We have people going in people's homes, putting guns to their heads. The time for being nice is over. I'm just going to call it out for what it is. People's like, but the guys haven't been caught. What if they happen? What if on the off chance they just happen to be a bunch of random white supremacists? What happens then, Mr. Ford? Like, that's kind of like, that's the political side of it all. So
yeah, well, I guess you just have to go with like trends and say, like, is it more likely that the unrest that we're seeing right now perpetrated by one group and its associated counterparts, is that more likely to be the cause of this action versus, like you said, the white supremacist skinheads from years back?
Mm-hmm.
We haven't heard much out of those folks in a hot minute. So what we're seeing is a lot out of one group. So it's like, if it quacks like a duck, it might be a duck.
Totally.
And maybe that duck might also be sitting on Union Station right now. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, he's going there. He's going there.
And it was funny because I was in a conversation with some folks today, and they had said, do you remember how much crap our Native brothers and sisters got in for blocking railways? Yep. They're like, why is that same kind of pressure being exerted on this group? Mm-hmm. Why does it not count? And I was just like, I don't know. I was like, it doesn't make sense. And they're like, yeah. They're like, the natives who lived in this place can't get any justice, but yet these folks who are coming from other places to Canada can. And I was like, oh, okay, we're getting into dangerous territory. But the problem is you're not wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one thing I do appreciate about this whole situation is because people are so traumatized and people have so many different ideas of how things are going or how things should look, and they've been told that things are a specific way. There's one element out of the scenario that's being pulled out, and I think it's a good thing it's being pulled out because people are seeing the hypocrisy of it all, is the people who are protesting at Union Station aren't white. So you take that out now. You can't just say, oh, it's the reason why they went so hard on the indigenous people is because, well, they're not white. And these white people can do whatever they want. Well, now that element is now pulled out. No white people involved in any of these scenarios. And now it's like, okay, now the government's motivations are being exposed for what they actually are. Pull the race out of it. What is happening? Why is there such inaction compared to this scenario versus this one? Very interesting.
Yeah, it definitely is. And the problem that I have with it all is that I feel like it's creating racism that wasn't there previously.
Yep.
And that's the problem that I have with it, is that this is creating racial tensions in our country where people who otherwise would not have felt that way are now espousing very racist views because they're angry and they're emotional and they're not thinking rationally. And then you have a government who fails to act on these kind of things. And, I'm all about your freedom to protest 100%. But as we saw, apparently there are limits. Mm-hmm. So why are these limits not being applied evenly? And that's the problem that I have, is that if it's going to be justice and it's going to be, rule of law, you have to apply it evenly. You can't pick and choose your favorite topic and your favorite ideology.
But the reason why they're doing it, though, and this is the issue, is if they do try to clamp down, they're going to face a lot of backlash. And that's where the political side of it all comes in. If you clamp down on it like you would anything else, well, then you're going to be kind of cast in a certain light. And so that's when politics get involved and maybe we don't want to do that. We're going to be seen as this, and that's going to cause an issue internationally here, this, that, the other. So we live the ideal that the law should be used evenly across the board, but it simply is not and will not in this country the way things are going. It's always politically motivated. Why do you think down in the States, the riots that took place in 2020 just kind of got a blind eye set to them? And they're mostly peaceful. Well, it's because it was politically motivated. You couldn't speak against it, or else there was political ramifications for that. Same thing happening here up in Canada as well as down in the States with these protests this summer. If you speak out against it, there's political ramifications, and you can't do that. And that's why U of T is being able to do whatever they're going to be able to do. They're a bunch of pansies over there in administration who aren't doing jack. And even the teachers coming out saying, well, if you try to take down those encampments, you got to go through us first. All right. And that's where we stand now. It's all political, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, the question I have, though, because I heard something in passing, so I don't want to repeat it, but my question is, like, how many of the folks that are at U of T are students of U of T?
Right.
That's the question I have. And I think I have that question for, like, all these different protests.
Totally.
It's how many folks that are there waving the flags, chanting the thing, are actually representative of the people most affected. Because otherwise it feels very performative, and then you have to ask the question, like, okay, if you're encamping on U of T and you're not a U of T student, is that really students exercising their right to action and to voice concerns and create dialogue? Or is it just kind of like hostile takeover? I want what I want. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, great question. We will see at this point. It's tension filled. I'm watching it. I'm keeping a close eye on it. We'll talk about it from here and there on the show. But all I know is I'm personally in support of peace. I want to see peace in our streets. I don't want to see violence. And whatever we can do to get to that point, I'm all on board for. So,
you know what I'm in support of? Dental plans.
Are you, sir?
I actually am. I think that dental
Wrench Singh over here.
Yeah, I think that dental actually should be included in healthcare, but I do not think that Ottawa should be issuing it. I think just like the rest of healthcare, it should be a provincial priority. And I'm bringing this up because I had a good talk with some dental hygienists about this.
Okay.
And so one of the things that we talked about in our show previously, we said that Nova Scotia has a dental plan. So it's called the Children's Oral Health Program for children 14 and younger, and then also individuals with special needs. They also classify. So that covers dental x-rays, exams, fluoride treatments, scaling, fillings, and necessary extractions. And so something I learned too through this, scaling, when you hear about that, the units of scaling, that's time. Mm-hmm. So it's 15-minute time increments. So you get 30 minutes in the chair, however long it takes to do the x-rays, however long it takes to do the fluoride. They count it all together, usually about an hour. And so there's an article that came out in the Halifax Examiner talking about the new dental program that's been offered by the federal government. They said that only 6 dentists in the whole province of Nova Scotia have actually signed up for this.
Woo!
And so it's interesting when you see Freeland and Trudeau get up there, and that was one of the things that Trudeau tried to put out there as a dunk against Poilivere most recently. He was like, we have 1 million seniors going for dental care and blah, 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 the talking point. Mm-hmm. And so like the dental plan that's only offered to people who are over 70 and make under 90K a year, which, if you're over 70, that's not hard to achieve. Yeah. I mean, you're usually living off of your pension, Canada pension, and a mix of savings and retirement funds. But what's interesting is that what was highlighted to me was the administrative burden for this program is so much so that the dentists are like, no, we don't want it. We're not going to take those patients because they've already been kind of complaining a little bit about taking on the patients that the province already funds. So the under 14 and the special needs patients, because they said that like basically the government, what they do is they go off of what they deem as the billing codes and how much money that is going to be. And in some cases, the billing code that they use is outdated by a year or two. And so the dentists themselves will lose out on that money. And they're just like, well, it's not as profitable of a patient, so we don't like doing them. We'll do them anyway and just I don't know if it's law or just good practice by dentists where they don't charge the extra to the patients because they're kids. And I'm like, that's pretty good. But, you know, also relying on the system to, out of the goodness of their heart, treat people and just eat the cost. Like, I'm glad that we live in a society and we live in a province where they do that, but it's kind of dicey. But one of the big things with this federal plan is the fact that they are rumored to be using 2018 prices for 2024 treatments. And there's a copay model to it as well. So the idea that dental care is like somehow all covered and you're great and you go in, you get your teeth cleaned and you're good to go. That's not the case. So what happens is they cover up to a certain portion and then you have a copay with it. And that copay can be anywhere from 40 to 60%. And so then what happens is that the patient comes out thinking that they've got everything covered, and the dental administrator goes, actually, you owe this amount, and your teeth were super bad. So the 2 or 3 scalings amount that you were allotted for actually don't even cover all the extra stuff that we did. So you actually owe an even larger amount as well as your copay. And dentists are going like, how are we going to get that out of people? They're already at a disadvantaged situation where they have to access the federal program. How are we then going to claw this extra money out of folks? Yeah. And they don't want to be hounding people for money from folks. Like, who wants to be the person who's knocking down an old lady's door going, hey, you actually owe us $272. Please pay.
I mean, just call the CRA. You'll find a couple people who want to do that. Yeah.
But it's not dentists. Yeah. It's not dentists who want that. Exactly. So they're saying that they don't want to do it. So they said the administrative burden of like going through all the paperwork of trying to get somebody, direct billed and the payment process for that, and going through the government programming to actually make that person qualify. They don't want to do that extra work, which rightfully so, because they've already announced that they have a shortage of staff. They have a shortage of dental hygienists, a shortage of dentists, and a shortage of administrators. And so they're like, we're already short. We're already running on a skeleton crew. Why would we administer this program? And I'm just like, I'm looking at it. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But yet Ottawa and Sun Life, that's who's offering it, good old Sun Life. They're like, nope, it's great. It's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. And these dentists are just greedy and they just need to get on board.
Yeah. That's typically the strategy of this government in any program they've put out, that they've had to partner with industry, where if the industry says there's some problems you have to think through and address, and they're just like, no, you suck. That's what our solution is, and you're just going to get on board with it. And that's kind of the answer here as well. And I'm glad the dentists are pushing back and making people aware of this, because like it even happened with the pharmacare stuff where it's like, it's not even rolled out, but they're doing victory laps on it as if it's been going on for years. And it's like, yeah, it's been a great program. People are using it. No one's using it. This ain't even rolled out. This thing's a joke. Like, what are we doing here? And the same thing is happening here with dental. And they're going to try and paint. You think it's a good political strategy to paint dentists as the bad guys? Good luck with that. And see how that goes.
Well, they've already done it with doctors. Like with the
how did it go?
The extra tax, right? So they keep painting our professional class as being these evil, money grubbing, like horrible people. They did it with landlords before that. Like, I'm starting to question now, like, how many of these individuals, like, I'll be honest, like seeing the Loblaws profit margins continue to go up and up and up. I'm not crazy about that. But at the same time, I'm like, how much of this is just political blame shifting? And, they're really actually to blame. So that, I don't know, the way that they're like brandishing everybody and their dog as being, racist, evil, anti-climate, everything. And you're like, I'm just a dentist, bro. I don't want to work for free.
Yeah. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what does it do? What does it do? We talked about it. They've done it to our healthcare professionals. They've done it to landlords. They're now doing it to dentists. They're kind of dragging people through the mud over not wanting to like bend to the will of the government. But like when it's all said and done, and say they're successful in really just getting the public to be against these people, what happens to a society when that happens? Everyone just kind of becomes homogenous and becomes like the same almost. And then like they only do the jobs that they're supposed to do to whatever, to the satisfaction of the government. And like, what happens to a society when that happens?
You get lower productivity is what happens. And it's interesting because there was a TikToker that I was watching, and he was like, you know, we talk a big talk about communism. He said, I come from a communist country. And he's like, I'm looking at what's happening. And he's like, this is how you create communism. It's like,
Yeah.
you first, you know, you discredit your working professionals, your intellectuals, and the rich. And then once you get them out of the way, either by horrific means in the past or these now like cancel campaigns in the future, like, and we're seeing the exodus of equity. We're seeing the exodus of like the brain drain and folks who are self-starters and, you know, ingenious people and inventive people just leaving. And that's not what we want.
And that's the path. And I appreciate you kind of bringing it up, because it's no longer the boogeyman of the right wing anymore, of like, communism, where we're going. They want to do this to our gas. Communism. Like that was always kind of the joke over the past, 30, 40 years. It was always like, well, we're going to go to communism. But no, it's at our doorstep now. The trends that things are going now, it's like, it's getting ugly out there and it's not fun. And when you're relying on your food banks to feed your people, you tell me what that looks like.
Yep.
So,
well, if it all goes to hell, at least they've got, some slush funds that they can pull from.
That net zero accelerator fund, baby.
So I don't know if you folks have seen this, but the Conservatives have actually forced an emergency meeting to investigate Trudeau's $8 billion with a B, net zero accelerator slush fund.
Light work.
And so what this was basically designed to do was it was supposed to provide some of the largest emitters in Canada with funding to commit to polluting less and to implementing new technologies and things like that to become greener. And so what happened, though, is that they had 17 companies. So two of them actually created commitments. The other 15, no commitments at all. Everybody got money, though.
Wow.
And there's only, how much was it again? Oh, yeah, 0.4 billion left out of that $8 billion fund. And so why they're calling this meeting, why they're losing their mind over it. So the audit that was done by Canada's Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development reported that most companies receive funding without commitments and that there was no tracking of the net zero accelerator's overall value for money in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So basically this audit found they were not doing any tracking whatsoever. People could have just said, yeah, I think maybe we might reduce emissions. Can we have some money? And they're like, sure. And to be fair, though, it wasn't quite that easy because it took 20 months per company to actually work through all the paperwork to get into this. So that's why there was only so few. But because there were so few, they got big chunks of money because they put in the 20 months. They got their money and they had no accountability for it. It was just tax dollars to business.
Surprise.
Wild.
Yeah.
So it should be interesting because they're going to force it in front of committee and they're going to force it in front of the House and have 5 days of public discussion on this. And it's another thing to add to the list. Put it right alongside We Charity and right alongside SNC Lavalin and the myriad of other things that are there. It's just another Arrive scam. You know what I mean?
Dental care.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it reminds me of our conversation with Michael Barrett a couple months back now, and where, again, as a Canadian citizen, I'm sick of the hearings. I'm done with the committee stuff. I'm over all of it. I just want action. But I know the intellectual side of my brain's like, yeah, but this is just the system we're stuck in, where the only power we have is, we have to do committee meetings just to keep showing the corruption, so that when the time comes for the polls to open up and people have a decision to make, they have all the information at their disposal to make their decision of like how bad this government performed in the past X amount of years. As an emotional person, I just want everyone in prison. That's how I feel. But I know that's just not the reality, and that's just not how things work.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the thing is, like, who are you going to imprison? Like, the companies just took advantage of something that was there. There was no legal rules broken, and the people who administered it were just following the policy as it was written. I mean, the people you'd have to imprison would have to be the very top, because they were the ones that did not put any evaluative metrics in this to determine whether or not this was going to be a useful and prudent use of funds. And that is just kind of something that's wrong with every part of this government, is that, and I can say this because I'm an evaluator, is that there's no evaluation done at all at any level to be able to show the value. And that's my biggest hope for our next government, is that they really do walk the walk, talk the talk, and do what they said they're going to do, and create some evaluative metrics for this to be able to show the ROI on the money that they're spending, so that people can have faith again in the government, because there's no trust, there's no faith. Like, everything just coming out now is just wasteful use of funds.
Yep, Swiss cheese. Don't trust the government. Don't trust the news. Don't trust any of our institutions. And then you see chaos in the streets. Man, there's things are bleak for people. And then you look south of the border and all the craziness that's happening down there with their upcoming election. You're just like, ugh, what the heck is going to happen, you know? So.
Well, that's the show. Have a great day.
Dude, I'm calling it, man. Trump's going to win an election from prison. It'll be interesting. They're tying him up enough to not be at the Republican convention when they announce their nominee. So, woo! Let's go. It's only getting more chaotic.
Yeah. If there's any hope, my hope is that there's enough people out there right now that are putting forward good ideas. And I saw one recently come across TikTok, and it was basically them talking about how India is such a huge polluter in the world, like producing so much CO2 because they burn so much coal. And they were saying that Canada has the third largest natural gas reserves here. And that if India switched to natural gas from coal, that they would cut their carbon emissions in half. And it would be a boon to the Canadian economy. It would be seen as greening. It would be seen as supporting Canadian infrastructure. It would be an export, so that you'd bring money back into the country. Like, so there is these kind of conversations happening. And it's funny because I keep seeing people, you know, commenting back, and they're like, but natural gas is still hydrocarbons, it's bad. And you're like, you're right. It's still creating CO2. But you know what's really great about it is that you transition. You move from the coal to the natural gas. And then probably by that point in time, once we've used up, you know, a decade or so of natural gas, what's really cool about the natural gas lines is that they also support hydrogen, which is a carbon neutral fuel. So if you could get that to a point where we have the advancements of technology that they can produce hydrogen in a really efficient way, you don't even have to take the infrastructure out. You just swap it to hydrogen. So it's like, it's about a transition. It's about the imperfect step. It's like, we're not going to utopia right away, because that's not how it works.
I don't know. Guibo told me that is how that works, though. He even told me by going up on the Premier's house roof back in the day, you know? He knows all the ways, because he's so smart. So
the way you said that, I almost thought you were trying to do a French accent.
No, dude, I may as well try, you know. Dude. Yeah. So did you want to touch on the report, or did you not get enough into it?
I didn't get enough into it.
That's
so
fair.
What we're talking about here is there was something that came out across TikTok by Fresh Daily. And so they're like, there was a report that 64.4% of impoverished Canadians are white. And then like the comment section just went crazy. I was like, what report? By whom? Where did you see this? Because like, it's just very inflammatory. It was very clickbaity.
Oh yeah.
So I started to do some digging into it. There was something that was published by the National Post based out of a study from some company that I'm not familiar with. So I have to do a lot more digging to try and find some evidence of this and try and see where they pulled these numbers from. Because if you're going to make a statement like that, it needs to be backed up, because it may sound good, but if it's not credible, you're going to get buried by people, especially buried by the far left.
Yeah.
Who's going to be like, look what these prices. So all that to say, it's something that's on the back burner. I'm looking into it. I spent quite a bit of time trying to find and go through the rabbit holes to figure out where this was at. But yeah, I need to do some more digging to validate it, because we don't want to bring you something that you're going to tell to your friends and they're going to look at you and be like, that's not true. And then it not be true.
Yeah, totally.
So we're here for evidence-based information.
Wildcard segment. I do have something I want to share.
Excellent.
I don't have a video. I have something I want to talk about for Wildcard, though.
Okay.
Can we talk about Eminem's Houdini? Dude, that thing was fire. I love that. And, he released this last Friday at midnight, and it was kind of an ode back to Without Me. It was released back in 96, 98. Eminem's like, doing his thing. The FCC won't let me be me, so let me see. They tried to shut me down on MTV, but it's still so empty without me. Similar vibes with Houdini, but, they use a Steve Miller Band song, Abracadabra. And Eminem goes off. And the premise of the song is, what if his alter ego, Slim Shady, transported from the 90s or teleported from the 90s to now? What would his reaction be? Lyrics were hilarious.
Yeah.
Loved it. The music video is great.
I watched it like 3 times over. I was like, this is so good. I had to send it to a couple people too, because it was such a fun thought experiment.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because it's what would that time, like what would you from that time think about today's times?
Yeah.
Honestly, I think from that point in time, like I've grown quite a bit. Like there's things that I obviously have definitely changed and become a better person in, but there's some things in this world that are just like absolutely backwards crazy. And I know me from back then would be like, and this is supposed to be less racist?
Yeah.
Like I thought we were all supposed to, go to the same show and be together. Why are we now promoting segregation?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? So it was a fun song. If you haven't heard it, go look it up, because it was fun.
Yeah. And like if you watch the music video is like really interesting. A lot of cool little things.
All the cameos too. They were so good. The amount of people that they brought into that, I was like, they got that and they got this person.
Yeah. The fact that it ended with Pete Davidson was hilarious. And his self-deprecating humor was great to end that all off. So I promise it's great. It's one of those scenarios where I know Eminem's politics. Like he really doesn't like Trump, really doesn't like any of that. But he also really hates cancel culture. And he hits back at cancel culture on both sides of the aisle on this, which I appreciated, which I thought was pretty funny. Him walking in with his Bud Light shirt.
Yes.
Gold. Absolute gold.
I think that was the first thing I texted to you. I was like, the Bud Light shirt.
Oh, it's gold. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Whatever it is you're doing, whether you be going to work,
going to the gym,
or finally seeing the end, coming to the conclusion of the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's here, baby. Let's see how this one ends out. Whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are, we love you. We're out. Peace.